Grace would like to be anywhere but here.
No, it's okay.
Okay. Good evening and welcome. Sustaining our Sherborn, a presentation to the citizens of Sherborn. My name is Grace Shepherd. I'm a member of a group called SOS, just a bunch of citizens. We've been meeting in this building almost every single Friday morning since January of 2011. We started out calling ourselves Save Our Sherborn. We were really concerned about some town issues, and we thought save might be the word. And then as we worked on things, we decided that our goal really was to serve our town, to provide information and data and analysis and help you understand what was going on in our town. And now this evening, we've gone a step further. We want to share with you what we believe is essential in order to sustain our town for the future we all hope for. I also want to thank a couple of people, Jim Campbell and all the SOS crew, but mostly Jim, and especially Jim, for all of the technical work and modeling that's gone into this presentation. And Earl Davis, who's a town citizen who does cartoons and who did a few for us. Now I want to ask you, if you can, to hold your questions till the end. Make a note, if you can, about which one it was that's bothering you. I really would hope that you could do that. There's a mic here that you can come up to speak, and that would be the best way at the very end. There's also a lot of people scattered through here who probably have a lot more information than I do and will do a lot of the question answering. So, good. Who are we? Well, as I said, we're just a bunch of people from town, and we just get together to think, to learn, to analyze, to share. And we're really very concerned about the financial future of the town. And our mission, well, we want the town to be sustainable for a very long time. So, Sherborn's financial situation, it's like a car on a road, a scenic road. We have a lot of those here. And we're just going along, and it's a beautiful road, but we see that there's some possibility of trouble up ahead. And we have to figure out what the trouble is and figure out what we're going to do. Our agenda then this evening is in 5 parts. First, we're going to talk about what we like about Sherborn. We're going to enjoy our ride. Then, we're going to talk about where we are today, our current financial picture. Then we're going to get to some of the obstacles we're facing as a town. And then we're going to seek an alternative route. What are the options that we can follow to make things better? At that point, we'll be open to comments. There are a lot of town officials here who may have something to say, and a lot of town citizens, and you're of course welcome to ask and say what you wish. So here we are, enjoying the scenery, and that is a great shot of a great Sherborn view. And the first thing we all know, because it's very, very important to all of us, is that Sherborn has great schools, and that is an enormous asset to our town. Okay. Ranking very high in the state, in the whole nation. And in case you don't know it, we have a new superintendent, and he really has some creative ideas, and it's a fresh environment for thinking about what the school can do. And we have always had strong support from the community for the schools, and we want to continue that. Sherborn has great schools, but do you know that we pay the highest teachers' compensation in the entire state? But perhaps more problematic is that we have a declining enrollment. Pine Hill's down 20%, and that's really important. And then finally, we've got another issue, which is that we're not getting worse. We're really great as far as our school goes. But other towns around us are closing the gap. It's not as special as it once was. Now, there's no doubt that Sherborn is a safe, green, wonderful place with lots and lots of open space and trails and paths and things that we love. But here's something I bet many of you do not realize. In 2000, until the year 2013, the amount of residential taxable, fully taxable property in town went down over 7%. Down. And the amount of totally untaxable or subsidized property, open space in town, in those 13 years went up 7%. And our nice, small commercial district stays as it was, unchanged. Population isn't changing. The numbers at the bottom show that. We're rolling along at about 4,400 people. That's what we seem to have. The one change is that we're aging as a town, and we're now up to 20% of our population being seniors. So where are we today? Well, we're driving along at the speed limit, and the speed limit in our metaphor is Prop 2.5. We're spending every penny of revenue we can get out of it at the moment. Now here are our trends. The bottom shows that it's years, fiscal year 1 through 14. Obviously the right side is millions. And you can see that our revenue trend from property taxes and other receipts from fiscal year 1 to 14 has gone from 11 million, to about 22 million. Our other receipts, that's excise and state money and anything that happens to come into the coffers, it's pretty flat. The CPI, if it was determining our property taxes, that's the slope we would have been increasing. So we've just been increasing, period. That means that in those 14 years, our property taxes have just about doubled. Other receipts have gone up 23%, and the CPI for that period of time went up 35%. I didn't say this, but let me remind you now, and I should have said it. This is going to be on our website. So those of you who think I'm zipping through or want to look later and see what the numbers are and where we got them, because there's a source on the bottom of every slide, it's there, just so that you realize that. So there's our revenue trend. We're moving along. And during that time, we have supported our schools vigorously. That's the top line from fiscal year 1 to 14, and the bottom line shows that we have also increased the general government. That is our expenditure trend. Now this is an interesting one, and this is one I want you to really pay attention to because I want to give credit where credit is due. From fiscal year 1 through 8, the town, on average, increased its budget each year 6.5%. Schools got 7.8, and the town got 4.1. And then someone, not just someone, many people in town government realized we couldn't keep doing this. Whoops. And so from fiscal year to fiscal year 9 through 14, the town cut its budget increase annually to 2.8%. We have been tightening our belt. And of that, the schools got 3%, and the rest of the budget's got 2.3%. The DOR, the Department of Revenue, State Department, at the request of the town, did a study in 2012. And it told us a few things which I think are important for us to realize. We've got the second highest tax bills in the state. That won't surprise us on average. Do you realize that we had 12 operating overrides since 1990? 6 of them were between the year 2000 and 2006. And this is, the fourth bullet there is a direct quote from the DOR. We added $5.2 million to our tax levy, which is compounded. It's a permanent tax increase. Compounding these tax increases are at over 25% of our current levy. Okay, so this is what we have done. We've also done $27 million of debt exclusion. But even with that, our debt payment in our budget is only 9%, which is not bad for a town. It could be a little bit less. And it's not really going to go down a lot because there's always something more. There's schools that need refurbishing. There are roads that need fixing. The library is doing a magnificent job of raising money for their big project, but the town's going to have to kick in something. So the thing to realize is that it is our omnibus operating budget overrides, which added the $5.2 million to our budget, and the debt has had an effect, but a much smaller one. And then there's something else. Prop 2.5, everybody knows that means your taxes go up 2.5% unless you have an override. But there's something more to it than that. There's also a ceiling of a tax rate of $25 per thousand. Now, we passed a lot of overrides, but we were able to maintain a really moderate tax rate because our real estate values were going up, really quite exuberantly. But now they have dropped, and our tax rate has gone over $20 as of this year. That's already 80% of the way up to the statutory limit. Okay, now what is the tax rate trend for Sherborn? The top red line is the tax rate ceiling. The bottom shows that we're going from fiscal year 6 through 14. That's when we stopped doing annual overrides. And the right-hand side is the tax rate. We went from under $15 a thousand when we stopped doing overrides to over $20 a thousand now. And the tax bill, of course, has followed right along. So the average house, which is about a $700,000 house, a little over, it has gone from under $11,000 a year to over 14. Now, there are many who say that we're getting value for it, and that is true, but there are problems with having such high tax bills. What are our obstacles ahead? Well, we've been on our scenic road, and now all of a sudden we've got a detour, and we've got potholes, and we've got to figure out what to do. We have pension commitments. I'm not going to go into details. You all know what pensions are. And the good thing is that the Board of Selectmen is paying attention to the problem and the issue. And the other night, they actually had the CEO of the Middlesex Pension Board in to talk with them and explain to them and to the town what the problems are and what we should be doing. One of the problems is that we aren't funding enough for the moment. We had some issues with the disabilities and such, but we're really at the low end compared to many other towns. And we have a deficit in our pension of over $8 million. And then there are the other post-employment benefits, healthcare, called OPEB. And it has been said correctly that the state is interested, some parts of state government, in having a new law that might help the communities pay their OPEB liabilities. First of all, they're never going to take them away. They may help. Second of all, the bill isn't going anywhere at the moment. It's very controversial. So even if we don't need to, in the future, totally solve this problem, it's still our problem, and we're going to have to do something. And we have an unfunded liability of over $11 million. So now, if those of you who are in business probably think in terms of net assets, and so here's the green line, that's the net assets of the town of Sherborn as reported from fiscal year 7 to 13 in terms of millions. Okay. Up until now, it has not been required by the laws governing community auditing procedures. It has not been required that the town show some of their liabilities. These pension and OPEB liabilities were not legally required to be shown, and they weren't. I might notice that some of the rating agencies are starting to notice. And one of the things they'll notice about Sherborn is that when we take our pension liabilities, that's where our net assets go. And when we add our OPEB liabilities, that's where our net assets go. So we have significantly, is the word up there, decreased the net assets of the town. This is just a chart to sort of add it all up, but it also notes that the regional school district has unfunded liabilities, and those aren't even in there. We pay at least half of those, ultimately, so those are our problem too. And we're really, even though we have been spending up to our 2.5% limit each year, and new growth, we still haven't been able to deal with this. We've started. Let me complete the sentence about OPEBs. We have put $100,000 a year for the last 5 years into a fund. The numbers I showed for the liability are minus that. So the longer we wait, the more expensive this gets. Is there another series of obstacles ahead of us? Well, real estate has been. Those of you who know someone who has been involved in town real estate recently know it's, some people were lucky and others were very uncomfortable. Now this is just a chart to give you a sense of some of our neighbors. It's prices from 2010 to 13, the median sales price in some of our neighboring towns. Wellesley's been incredibly hot, and we'll talk about why in a minute. And its prices have gone up 19%. Natick, starting from a much lower base, has also been soaring, and its prices in that 3-year period have gone up 17%. Some of the other towns, Wayland is doing well, Dover's not doing badly. We're not doing so terribly. We've gone up 3%, but we're certainly not hot. So we're moving along a little bit. This is another somewhat interesting way of looking at it. In 2010, in Wellesley, they were getting, when they actually sold a house, they were getting 92% of the asking price. Now that either means they asked something close to the right price or they found a good buyer. And now they're getting 95. So they're doing well. Each of those towns has had an improvement in the relationship between their asking price and their selling price. I can't help thinking that Dover's 88% in 2010 is because they couldn't believe their houses weren't worth as much as they once were. And I suspect there's some of that in Sherborn too. But we've done something unfortunate we got 92% on average of the asking price in 2010, and the average now is 91. So we're really lagging in the real estate market. And this is one of the reasons that Wellesley's doing well and Newton's doing incredibly in Brookline, is young people are looking for something a little different this day. This is a national trend. This is not a Sherborn trend. Young people are looking for places that they can easily commute to because in so many young couples, both are working and they want to have an easy commute, either train or a car, but an easy commute. They don't want a lot of maintenance. They don't really have the time or the interest in taking care of big backyards. They like a town center with something going on. Starbucks, I've heard, is a goal in Sherborn. Young people showing up at realtors today know all about tax rates of all the towns around here. I know my kids do what you do, which is go on the internet and find out everything you can possibly find out. So that is something they walk into a realtor with. They want good schools for their kids, but they don't necessarily think it has to be the absolute top. So, in terms of Sherborn, wow, the top priorities of open space and outstanding, ultra outstanding schools may not be quite as valuable as they once were. High property taxes are a concern expressed by people coming to buy houses. As a result, sales in Sherborn are under real price pressure. And we're in danger of losing some of the shine off our brand as a town. Okay, what other obstacles? Well, not what other obstacles. How could we avoid the obstacles? We need to continue to slow down. We slowed down from a very high increase in our budgets to a 2.8 increase in our budgets. That's good, but we may have to do more. This is the projected tax rate through fiscal year 24. The tax rate is on the left. The ceiling I mentioned earlier, Prop 2.5, 25, is along the top. And we're talking about fiscal year 9 through projection. And, you know, projections are worth what we can put into them, but they are not the absolute future. If we go along at 2.5% increase a year, that's the line. If we drop it to 2% a year, which is a tough budget, you can see that it improves the trajectory line and keeps us from roaring up to the ceiling of 2.5. But it doesn't cut anything, it just slows it down. Projected tax bills, same kind of a thing. At the present rate, the tax bill on an average house will roar up to $18,000 a year in the next period of time. This was projected up till fiscal year 24. And if we cut our budgets and cut our spending, we might, at 2%, bring it down to just under 17,000. Not an enormous change. And as it notes at the bottom, the tax rate may have a ceiling, but our tax bills have no ceiling. So, we think Sherborn must consider a new economic model which slows growth in expenses. That means we want to continue not having Prop 2.5 overrides. We've done well since 2006. We want to challenge all the budget makers, both government and schools, to be as cost-effective as possible, as creative as possible. Think out of the box is the phrase, I think, as much as possible. and try to keep our expense growth to 2% a year. But is there something better, more that we can do? Can we seek an alternative route? Well, we think a new economic model would be improved by new sources of revenue. Specifically, we think that we have to welcome some low-impact developments, some new growth, some new taxpayers. Averaging financially, the numbers should be about 10 to 15 units a year, or periodically something bigger than that. Bringing more revenue into the town. Low-impact growth, our goal. We think the town should invest in the downtown infrastructure. That means water or sewer or both. That would enlarge our commercial economic base. Remember that early slide? It hasn't changed at all. That would enlarge its capacity. It would provide the option for some desirable services, and it would enhance the desirability of our town, which is very, very important. We also think that we should make a big deal about our great schools. And I want to be clear, we should not negatively impact them in any way. We should support them. We should even try to make them a magnet, because there is the possibility out there of tuitioning in students from other communities. And if you think that that people who live in communities that pay lower taxes, and they might not like their schools, but that community doesn't spend anywhere near as much as we do, just remember that the parents would have to pay $20, $30, maybe more, $1,000 to go to a private school, and realize what a bargain tuitioning in to our high school would be. So it's a real possibility. And we should explore regionalization. I bet not many of you know that the towns of Hopkinton and Ashland at this moment are deep in negotiations to combine their fire departments. Regionalization is possible. It's tough work, but it is possible. Okay, so here we are back with our average tax bill projections. Thousands on the left, fiscal year 9 to 24. And this again is the 2.8% growth trajectory. Here's the 2% expense growth trajectory and improvement. And here is the 2% expense growth and new construction trajectory. And for the first time, we can project bringing our taxes under control, which will enhance the desirability of our community in every way. So where do we think we have to go in order to achieve financial sustainability for Sherborn? Controlling costs isn't really enough. Sherborn needs to expand its tax base. We need to carefully, but inevitably, grow. Control budgets, expand the tax base, invest in the town center, phase in increased funding of all those obligations, and explore sources of revenue beyond the usual real estate. So, to retain the qualities of the Sherborn we all love, we have to deal with these problems, with these issues. We can meet these issues with a plan and open minds, or we can wait to deal with them until we have a crisis and see what happens. and it's your choice. So, thank you. Now, there are town officials of all sorts are here, and some of them may have something they want to add to this. And I would say to you that there is a mic there, or there's a chair and a mic here, depending upon what you like.
All right, I'll start.
Peter.
Peter Caruso, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen. This is great, Grace. Really appreciate you doing this. Good food for thought. I wrote some notes down just to be sure I remember my points. It's also great to see this big crowd here of folks paying attention, including a number of folks that work for the town and make the donuts every day. So it's good to see them out. They're also concerned about the future of Sherborn. Yesterday I was at an Eagle Scout ceremony. It was a beautiful day, special day for Sherborn. There's one of our investments, a couple of our investments really being realized very well. A week ago, I was at the Memorial Day festivities here in town. Very special day as well. One common denominator, I think, was Mike Kickham. So, you know, it's just one of the many people that make things happen in this town. We have so many volunteers that do stuff. As far as the financial sustainability and all that, one way to look at it, if you think about if you've made a car purchase, how much time and effort you've spent researching the car that you're going to buy. Well, hopefully, you know, this will stimulate more people to pay more and more attention. One of the things I like about SOS is that there's this group of folks who get together, as you said, every day for what, 3 years now or whatever, and they're paying attention, and that's great, trying to learn and understand. You know, where is your money being spent? You get the government that you allow, basically. Things that, you know, I'm concerned about, I think you've touched on very well. The benefit and legacy costs are quite challenging. And, you know, if we don't continue to pay attention to that, we'll keep putting the costs that we're incurring on future taxpayers, including our children and grandchildren. That concerns me, so we got to figure something out there. The schools continue to be challenging to maintain the continuing levels of excellence. We do have a great superintendent. We've got good school committee folks, all volunteers, who get what you're talking about here, which is terrific. You know, we're understanding values versus outcomes, and I think you see technology becoming a bigger factor there to get more for your money. Part of what you're talking about in terms of development, we have lots of land that I would argue we don't know quite what we're doing with it at this stage. If you go to a budget meeting with the Conservation Commission, they'll walk in and say, we're not maintaining the properties we have well, we need more money. Well, that's a challenge. Look at Laurel Farm Fields. You hear the rec department every few years surfacing saying it's dangerous out there. The communities that come in and play on those fields complain. So there you go. There's just a couple of pieces of land, you know, land issues that we deal with. I happen to live across from Whitney Farms, as they now call it. Shock and awe, that is going to, I think, the ramifications of the residents that do move in there, they'll become our neighbors. But it's going to be particularly financially challenging. I don't even know how you'd factor that into some of those graphs you had there, but I think they'll be quite significant. So those are comments I had. I think what you've done here is great. I think people need to continue to ask questions and understand. The way I see it, Sherborn, you get that thing from advisory, read that thoroughly when you get that in the spring. It shows we have you're paying for $25 million worth of town activities. It's really a $30 million business venture, but stuff is hidden in different places. So that's all I have to say. I think that's great. I hope people ask you questions and have other things to say. By default, I had to go first. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Mary?
I'll go second. Mary Wolf, I'm Chair of Sherborn Advisory, and I have a few prepared words here. Again, thank you, Grace, and all the people in SOS for putting this together. I think it's valuable information for the town. I can fill you in on a few things that Advisory has asked of the budget makers this year. We, as always, ask for an increase of no more than a particular percentage, and we would be, in fact, very happy if people were to come in under the percentage that we gave, and this year it is 1.4%. I'll include also that the Personnel Board has recommended a COLA of 1%. The CM&D contract is also at 1% salary increase, and there is a memorandum of agreement between the Board of Selectmen and the police that is also a 1% salary increase for the next 3 years of, per year for each year of that contract. I would like to speak to capital expenses as well, because even though they are not the bulk of the budget, they do indeed increase the budget. And advisory sees a bit of a psychological barrier at $20, and the debt service on the town's expenses comes to $1.70 on the mill rate. So if that debt service were to come down, perhaps we could get down below $20 again, I don't know, you know. It adds $1,200 to the average tax bill. So advisory will be looking very carefully this year at all capital expenses, and I would ask people in the town, when they are considering capital expenses at annual town meeting, to think in terms of maximizing value for dollars spent. So look carefully at where the requests are coming, what they are coming for capital expenses, and think about maximizing the value to the town over time. OPEBs have been mentioned. Advisory has formed a subcommittee this year to look into the OPEB situation. 3 of our members have agreed to take that on, and hopefully they will be able to give some direction or at least possible alternative scenarios to the town. I'd like to talk about the schools a little bit, both in terms of finance and in terms of population. The schools are obviously, they're 70% of our budget, but we are having some very good news there, I believe. At their meeting last week, the Sherborn School Committee, well, the superintendent actually presented to the school committee a preliminary budget that does include an undisclosed amount for the teacher contract that is currently in negotiation. And that budget was coming in significantly under advisory's guidance. So that is certainly a step in the right direction by several $100,000 at this point. And we know that this is not a final budget, but we're hopeful that it will. The capital budget for Pine Hill School, they went out and did a 20-year plan a couple of years ago, and originally on the schedule for this year was over $400,000 in capital expenses, and the capital expenses that were brought forth at the school committee meeting the other night also are now down to less than $120,000. So that is good as well. The draft budgets for the region we have not seen yet. They are in the works, and so I can't speak to those right now. But I think the new school administration is to be congratulated for taking very seriously Sherborn's financial situation. And we've also talked with Dover Warrant, and although they are in a very different financial situation, they are cognizant of the difficulties that we have here. And in fact, they have also said that while they are cash rich and we are cash poor, they can see sustainability problems even for themselves going down the road. And I'll speak to that a little bit more in a minute. So we'd like to see a broader tax base as was recommended here, with more development of property and also some non-property development as well. One of the things I want to talk about is the continuing supply of school-age families and the impact that this has on the town. I just want to give you some interesting statistics. Right now, the regional school population is very robust, and it will continue to grow through the class of 2018, when the total high school population is projected to peak at 700 students. Unfortunately, the Pine Hill School population is already shrinking and has lost approximately 100 students in the last 7 years. And I was just recently on the Department of Education site, and statewide, the school-age population is projected to decrease from now, at least through 2022. They did their statistics in 2012, and so they went 10 years out. But I think, you know, it's certainly valid what they've done. Just to give you some statistics on the schools, today in FY14, at 367 students, we have the smallest Pine Hill enrollment since at least 1993, which is how far the DOE statistics go back that I was able to pull up, when Pine Hill enrollment at that time was 395. So, you know, we're down 30 from 1993. Today at 642, we have the largest high school enrollment since 1993. And I think I mentioned that in 2018, the high school enrollment will peak at 700 with a graduating class of 188 students. But current trends indicate that in that same year, Pine Hill School enrollment may be close to or even dip below 300 students. Today, there are 73 students in grade 5, 58 in grade 2, 53 in grade 1, 49 in kindergarten, and the town available census shows 48 for next year's kindergarten, so things are decreasing there. By the time today's kindergarten class are seniors in the high school, they are projected, if the trends continue, to have a class of 115 students in a high school of 460 students. And that's a system of 1,495 students, including Sherborn and Dover, which is only one more pupil than the system-wide population in 1993. So we have gone up and we are heading down again. I would point out that the schools today need to offer a tremendous amount more than they offered in 1993. The competition that the students are facing in going on to elite colleges and universities, which is what parents want when they're looking to buy in a place like Sherborn, is just incredibly more intense than it was in 1993. In 1993, if you had, you know, maybe a team and a couple of extracurricular activities that you were involved in, and you had, you know, pretty good grades in college prep and honors classes, you were in pretty good shape. That's no longer the case. The pressure is on for an increasing number of AP courses, for a number of extracurricular activities and all these other things. And so I've been looking at this, you know, in talks with the schools, and I am a little bit worried about the number of students coming into the school system in order to reach critical mass. And I think it's important that when this is it's a very big deal for us, really, because we need a lot of, we can absorb a large number of students. We talked about the teacher compensation, once you put someone who's earning between $60,000 and $90,000 in front of a classroom, that $60,000 to $90,000 is sunk cost, whether they're teaching a class of 15 or 22. And if you have 3 of them or whatever, you want to maximize what you're getting for your money. So I think it's great to try to bring in some populations that will not be using the schools, the seniors. They'll be paying taxes, and they won't be sort of taking them back out again. But it would be great if we can pitch our town to people who are the young families who are also looking for a place to settle. And we need school children because we're still going to be running a grammar school, we're still going to be running a middle school and a high school, and we need critical mass for those things. So I just want to definitely stress that, and I think that some of the things that have been mentioned as far as being attractions for downtown, there are attractions for everyone. There are attractions for seniors and there are attractions for young families. When your town is walkable, everybody wins. When there's opportunities for one-stop mini shopping where you can, I always say this, people will laugh, but pick up a chicken if you want one. You want to be able to do that whether you have 5-year-olds or whether you yourself are 75 years old. And the library project, again, that's an endeavor that will serve all populations that come here, from the tiniest little people sitting on their parents' laps up through senior citizens who can see it as a place where they can gather as well. And finally, I'd like to put in a pitch for curb appeal downtown. That's, I think, very important when people come to look at the downtown, what they see and what makes them want to buy here. So I guess that's, pretty much what I wanted to say. I probably went on longer than I intended to, but
well put, Mary.
But I think it's important, and we need all kinds of people. And I don't know if this is being filmed or not, to be honest with you. But if it is, then I would like to make a particular pitch to the families of young children to come out to town meeting, involve yourselves in a variety of things in town that are not necessarily involving your children, but will bring value to the town. And I ask you to support items and articles that come up at town meeting that may not have a direct impact on the school, but if they increase the perceived value of the town, the schools will certainly benefit. So
Well said.
that's
Thank you. Yes.
I'm John Higley, I'm on the planning board. I couldn't agree more with Peter and Mary, and my view is planning, and so I think about where we go from here. The planning boards spend quite a bit of time, well, the planning board's responsibility is things like subdivisions and protecting our scenic roads and some special permits, things like that, but also maintaining the master plan. Our current master plan is 2001, and to begin a new or review or update of our existing master plan, we've drafted a town center report that has some scenarios of development with water and sewer utilities, just a hypothetical, and then another hypothetical type of development without utilities. And it was just it's a draft, and that report is on our planning board website, it begins with a review of past master plans and past surveys, and there's nothing new. I mean, we've talked about development ideas, a lot of different ideas, a great bypass, all kinds of things. The surveys are pretty uniform as well, and I thought it would be good to sort of, I wanted to mention particularly a couple of quotes that are on the SOS website, and in a previous presentation, then a couple of others I'd like to add. One is on the SOS website, Thomas Jefferson: "Whenever people are well informed, they can be trusted with their own government. That whenever things go so far wrong, they attract their notice, they may be relied upon to set them right." I thought that was a great thing. So I want to really thank SOS for this meeting and the work that's been done and the information, because it's informing us. And if we disagree, we get a chance to work on it. And if we agree, we get a chance to contribute to it and spread the word. But I think the communication stuff is just critical to our town, more than it perhaps ever has been. And the other great quote, and Grace, you informed me of this, but Lampedusa and the leopard said, "If we want things to stay the same, things will have to change." You know, that's, so I think those are two really important quotes. I did have a couple of others, just two more I wanted to add. One is a fellow in town told me when I was elected to the planning board, he said, "Don't screw things up." I have not forgotten that. And then the other quote is, "I like things the way they are." And that one's from me. So I guess I moved to town a long time ago, and I really like the town, and I think everyone here moved to town because they really like the town. And I think these slides have done a fantastic job of sort of highlighting some of those reasons. We are an oasis. From a planning point of view, we look at smart growth and things that are going on in our economic environment today, and we can see there are a lot of changes around us. We can look at Millis and their town center and all the changes. They've added sidewalks and lighting and changed some zoning to put new buildings close to the sidewalk to make it more walkable. We can see what's gone on in Natick. Norfolk's got a rotary. I mean, there's a lot of things in a lot of towns around us that have been done to enhance their town centers. As has been mentioned, there's a real move towards urbanization, move towards the city, and the towns that are closer to the city, but also closer to public transportation, those corridors of public transportation are extensions of the city and walkable towns centers themselves, and those are investments that are being made. So we, the Sherborn, really have a lot of decisions to make. Grace, I don't know if you can go back to slide 44. It's only a few back. It's that graph, yeah. I look at that as a planner and say, okay, so this is the path we're on, the solid line. That's the path we're on. We've got, in that path, it's got great schools, it's got this green oasis. I'm on the energy committee, and we are very proud of the progress that the town has made as a green community for energy reduction and things like that. I have just amazing admiration for conservation, open space, Sherborn Rural Land Foundation, Sherborn Forest and Trails, and our agricultural community in keeping the green space we have. I suppose I could say another quote was, I think we've got too much open space. I don't. I'd like to keep it all, but I don't think we can. So there's my concern. Those dotted lines are what's the path we're on, and all the environment that's been described. And the other dotted lines are different paths we could take. So those are the paths that we need to make decisions on, and what goes into it. Expense growth and new construction, well, we have to get a lot more specific and things like that the town needs to make decisions on. We've had surveys. They've been really useful. The town supported the idea of a water utility in the town center, but didn't want to pay for it. Right now, we have the planning board sponsored a smart growth or smart sewer preliminary feasibility study to see what it would take to put a particular type of sewer technology in the center of Sherborn, and that report's nearing completion. So that we'll be seeing that report soon. We've done past water surveys. The idea of putting utilities in the center of town is not a new idea. We need to look at it in this new environment, and things change. So those are things we've looked at. The town has a planned unit development method of increasing the town center business area a little bit, but with much greater control. Those are things that we've looked at in the past. We have a plan now. We've seen some changes in our current general plan. We talk about adding EA, or elderly and affordable, and we've got a project at our last town meeting. We approved that change to the EA zone, to add an EA zone in the center, and that project is proceeding. It's going through that process. That's 2 North Main, the Abbey Road project. So there are things that town's looking at for change. As from a planning point of view, any change that goes on, I guess I really want to see it add to the walkability or the enhancing the town that Mary described, things that really will help us in terms of being competitive with our property values, competitive with tax revenue that helps us afford that great school system, and also keeps as much of the oasis as possible. So those are planning things that I think really we, the town, or if I look at that slide, I see a lot of changes or things we could change in town in order to go on the path we want. And making that conscious decision is really important. So I want to tell you that in your census in January, you'll get a survey. Everyone in town will get it. Look for it. It'll also be available online, so we encourage people to use that as well. And that information we're trying to replicate as much as possible a past survey so that we can compare and see trends and things like that. But also we've updated, we've gotten a lot of input from people and updated that. So that survey is another form of communication that'll help us. And as Mary said, town meeting, there's a lot of other boards and committees that meet between now and then, and getting new folks involved, really, really important. This type of communication is critical. I really want to thank everyone for being here because we need to make decisions on that path.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, John. When it comes to communication, let me just mention that green sheet on your chair is because if you would like, you can stay in communication with SOS, and we do send out material every week about our meetings and about what we know is going on in town. So, yes.
I just
Peter.
want to put a quick plug in. Thursday night's Board of Selectmen meeting, we have John representing the planning board coming to tell us what's going on. You know, the selectmen, we're just, approving permits and writing checks. We get to hear the long-term stuff. So pay attention to that, the reruns and so forth. I'm really looking forward to hearing the bigger picture stuff you're dealing with. That's great.
I don't know if anyone else wants to come forward. Are there questions, comments? There's a hand way in the back. Please come forward because there's a mic and this is being taped.
Who do you want first, Grace?
Not you, Doug. You can go. If I wanted you, I'd say your name. Please, you're second. Please
Sorry if my
introduce
back
yourself.
is to everyone, but I'll face the
But
chair
you're
if I
on the
may.
mic, and that's important.
I'm on the
I think.
mic.
Right.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Andrew Mackay is the name. I live on Spywood Road. My family and I have been here for 2 years. I'm actually, just to give you some background on me, since you can pick up the accent is different. I was born in Florida in the 60s and spent a lifetime overseas. I spent 20 years ago, I lived up in Swampscott, went overseas again and decided that my lifelong love affair with America needed to see the fruition in my 4 daughters coming and seeing this extraordinary country operate and come to its great colleges. And my oldest daughter is now at Duke University, and my other 3 are at high school and middle school in Dover-Sherborn. I want to just tell you, Grace, I don't know much about your committee, but I want to just briefly say my salute to you and your committee, because you're the first absolute breath of fresh air I have heard in 3 years of owning property in this town. Honestly, I held my breath as you said, we got to keep cutting costs. Yeah, but nothing in life gets solved by that kind of, backward foot on the brakes. I want to just tell you briefly, folks, and I don't want to abuse the mic, but I'm a chartered accountant by formal training. That's a CPA with some other degrees. I've run large listed companies in different places in the world. I'm now in my mid-40s, set up my own businesses around the world. I'm about to go off to 2 international Skype meetings now. I came here tonight because I'll tell you, my other passions in life besides business are in fact wilderness. I run these trails every single day of my life. When sadly many of you are in traditional corporate environments, I've structured my life that I can enjoy the wonderful beauty of this special town with wonderful people like my dear neighbor Ernie there. Salt of the earth, you couldn't ask for a finer man as your neighbor. Folks, I tell you, my other passion in life is birding. I'm a deeply conservation-minded individual. I'm not just a businessman standing here from out of country and looking at many of you who've spent 20, 30 years here. What does the new boy want to say on this subject? What I want to share with you briefly is this. I came to this beautiful town having researched it from halfway around the world. And I came here and I started to invest in a beautiful property here. Ernie will know how much I've spent. I've probably invested $250,000. And I want to tell you, I put the brakes on that recently because my experiences have appalled me at how close-minded the development attitude is in this town. And it will kill this town, stone dead. Honestly, I have spent over $100,000 on just getting a septic tank approved on an existing piece of property that I just wanted to actually improve. I wanted to put 2 units on for my aged parents. You cannot believe what I went through with the health board and every other board in this town just to get this septic tank approved. I was subjected to water tests that honestly, the well was approved, and when I linked it through to my home, just because the new piping was there, it triggered one little criteria on my water test. And forgive me, I want to make a point here. The criteria in California is you can't have 50 parts per million. In California is they will tolerate 150 parts per unit. I think Boston, actually, Massachusetts will tolerate 50 parts per million. Sherborn tolerates 0 parts per million. My water test came back with 2 parts per million. My water people told me it's because of the actual water, the plastic in the piping, it's new in the house. I went through 3 tests with a water company where we were running my pipes for a week to flush out that at over $500 a shot. And I've spoken to one of the members on the health board, and forgive me, no offense to them. They said, no, but you know what? There's no reason why we should change it. It's always worked that way in this town. Folks, that is the smell of decadency and staleness that will kill any town. I want to finish on one other comment. This beautiful little village we have downtown is beautifully geographically positioned. It's a perfect little town for little shops to be lining it that don't overwhelm this community. That you could have a little Starbucks or another little, beautiful little brand. Most of the villages around here, they're all split up. Sherborn is begging for a beautiful little town community. All I see is to let signs. I know businessmen like Ed Rose have spent years trying to put deals together in this town and been vetoed at the last minute because no one wants to change a thing. Folks, I tell you, this is a very special corner of the world. But I'm putting a brake on developing my own property, and I've got a lot of people who've been intrigued that I moved and said, how did you find Sherborn? This is a very special school here. My kids have been at private school their whole life. And we've gone to a public school here that is some of the finest I've ever seen. And my family are littered with teachers. They know a good school from a bad school. This is an extraordinary little town in America. And I want to salute your committee, Grace, because I tell you, it's with that foresight that you will save this town. Because if you hit the T-junction at speed before having seen it and you say, well, let's just see how bad the crash is, that's not the way to handle a chat. You want to be putting on some brakes long before the T-junction and saying, you know what, maybe it's coming up fast and we should do something about it. I don't want to abuse the time on the mic. I just want to salute your committee, and I really personally hope that actually this wonderful community will just broaden its thinking and start saying, you know what, maybe we can start just easing the lot on developer, that if private property owners want to actually develop their homes, then make it easy for them, for goodness sake. If someone wants to have a development in town, let them put some development there. It's not going to change the character. I'm out there running the trails and birding. I don't want the character of Sherborn to change. But we have got to release some of the development here and start getting our revenues up. And I promise you, middle generation families like mine will come from near and far to say we would love to have that beautiful mix. But if we just keep an ironclad hold, general meeting after general meeting that I go at, and it's nay, 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 nothing will change. That, folks, for a very educated community, I'm sorry, is short-sighted and will kill this beautiful town eventually. I salute you, Grace. You have my absolute total support. Thank you very much.
My goodness. Thank you. Doug.
I'm Doug Brody. My question, Grace,
Yes.
revolves around the fact that your analysis here has a great deal to do with development, increasing development, residential development. When we did the 1978, my God, 78 master plan, good number of years ago, one of the things that we determined before we were able to buy the Barber Reservation along with the state, the reason why we bought it, is that the average house that was being built in Sherborn with the average number of kids, which I think was 2.8 or 2.6, was a money loser based upon the taxes that will be derived from that house. And so we really made a very strong case against development at that time.
That was the view at that time, without a doubt.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious to know, I'm sure you've done an analysis on this. What is the situation now with the average house in Sherborn going up with the average number of kids? Is that now a money maker for the town as opposed to when back then it was a money loser?
I will say one thing, and then anyone else in my group who knows more than I do, believe me, I'm just a spokesman. But you have to understand that there's a fallacy in a lot of the thinking, because each kid doesn't represent the whole lump of money. The building has been built. The desks are there. The teachers are there. It's not to say that if you get lots of influx, there isn't an increase in cost, but we have a declining number of students. So it'd be very hard to say that our town is going to be very negatively impacted if I decide that one of these senior things going up at the Abbey is great and I want to move in, and a family moves in and replaces my 3 children with their 3 children.
Yeah.
So I think we have to think about it differently. But is there someone here who wants to answer it more technically? It's a valid question. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a couple things to say, but I actually,
Go.
I can respond a little bit to that.
Please.
Richard Robinson, Mill Street, and Chair of the Regional School Committee. I've been on the committee for now, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and sitting in the cheap seats for a couple years before that, and I have never heard an argument that there is a step effect that we can budget for, and meaning that while it may be true that when you lose 10 kids, there's a cost savings there that you don't realize with 9. It's not something you can actually, in other words, if you lose 10 kids, maybe that means you don't have to have an extra teacher or something like that, whereas 9 maybe is too few for that. I've never heard a budget discussion in which that has come up, because there are, in my experience, far too many complicating variables to allow that to happen. So I would say, in answer to Doug's question, is I'm not smart enough to know the answer to it, but I've never heard someone make a cogent argument that the more kids you have, you can teach them with the same amount of money. the more kids you have, as far as I can tell, is going to cost you more money.
Yeah.
That may be true for one kid, obviously. It may even be true for 9 or 12 kids. But I'm not sure that we can play that game carefully enough to allow a rosy budgetary scenario come from increasing the housing stock and hoping that we hit the sweet
I
spot.
think the comment was that the taxes of a household wouldn't cover the costs. And I was just saying that the cost number isn't as big as many people projected it to be. Of course there's costs.
Yeah, obviously.
So, Michael, do you want to add something?
I'd be inclined to note.
Could you come up here or come to a mic?
Well, this is going to be very brief.
Okay.
I'll
So
repeat.
there are a few towns that send more kids to public schools than Sherborn, and they either greatly restrict the funding in their education, like Medfield, to maintain a reasonable tax rate, or they've already hit their long-term crisis, like Harvard, or they're in the middle of it, like Sudbury. So I think that what's healthier for the town is a mix of housing that will bring that ratio down over time. It will ebb, it will flow. Right now, the kids are in high school, which is very expensive. Later on, they may show up in elementary school, but only by bringing in housing that also appeals to people who are generous, let's say empty nesters or singles or whatever, will we bring a balance to the town that will give us the financial resources to support the high quality services we want.
That wasn't short and it didn't go well.
A balance of housing stock, I think. is
A
what-
balance.
I had a couple of.
Of course.
A couple of points and then a question. You mentioned in your discussion the idea of tuition-paying students from surrounding community as a potential revenue source. It's a very enticing idea. However, the Regional School Committee considers this every year. It's called school choice, and we always have a vote in the spring about whether to engage in it. And every year the point is made that two things argue against it. One is the amount of money that comes in per student. It's about $5,000. And again, if you look at the per pupil costs, we're obviously well above that. You can go back to that same argument about, does it really cost you $13,000 to take in one kid? Probably not. And so maybe that $5,000 would be worth it. But again, it's very difficult to hit that sweet spot. But the other point, which I think is always more persuasive to the Regional School Committee, at least as I've understood it, is that when we open ourselves to tuition-paying students from surrounding towns, we don't get to choose. It's not as though we can say, we will take you, but we won't take you. And that is opening the school to, I think, risks that are probably difficult for us to, have been difficult for us to accept for either $0 or in fact a losing case. I will say one thing though, and here I want to give a huge amount of credit to our new superintendent. Mr. Bliss has been looking at not students from surrounding towns, but foreign students. Foreign students come in with full reimbursement for the per pupil costs. We do get to choose.
That's what we meant.
Okay, well, those aren't surrounding communities, and if you sit on the school committee, boy, that makes a big difference, yeah. And the program, these visa programs have been very successful in some of our surrounding
Thank you
communities.
for
We're-
clarifying
we're
that,
looking at
because
that.
I didn't. Okay.
One or two more small points.
Sure.
One is that we meet the Regional School Committee meets every first Tuesday of every month, 6:30 over at the middle school library. Boy, we would love to see a half, nay, 10% of this crowd at our meetings. We really would welcome your participation. And then something that you said along the way was regarding OPEB benefits, and we at the Regional School Committee also struggle with this question of what to do about it. You said the longer you wait, the more expensive it gets, and I've never quite understood why that's true. And let me just make a couple of what I hope will be clarifying confusions, and then I can maybe get an explanation. First of all, I'm going to put in a plug here. It is true of building maintenance. The longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. And we have a lot of building maintenance we have to do at the Regional School Committee. We hope you'll support it. But I don't understand it as far as the OPEB benefits go. If I were paying a credit card bill It would certainly be the case because there are usurious interest rates that are attached to paying my bill late. I don't think that's the case with OPEB benefits. So I don't get that part of it. Whereas if I were setting up a Christmas club and I missed a whole month or even a whole year, it wouldn't cost me any more by the time I got to actually paying that bill. So I'm sure the answer must be somewhere between those two. But
Investment, earning money.
Okay, so then I ask you the question, and I ask it a little bit provocatively, which is, the only choice here is whether those investments should be made by me personally as a taxpayer, and then 10 years from now I'll pay more taxes, or whether I should pay those taxes now and have the town invest that money. And I'm not sure why it's beneficial one way or the other. I know that bill is coming and I know I'm going to pay it, but it's not clear to me why I need to pay it right now in excess versus paying it 10 years from now. Is that question clear?
I know what I think, but I would rather if one of the fellows who is here and knows a lot more about it, like our chairman of our Board of Selectmen, who is really versed in it. I just figure that if you put the money in the bank and it earns money, you've got more money in 10 years, and then you wait to put it all in at once in 10 years.
I can put my money in.
But will you? Let Peter give you the good answer.
All right. The 11 million she showed up there, 11.4, that's going to grow to 12 million a year later. If we put 200 grand roughly a year away, that liability won't grow by 400,000 every year. These are actuarial schedules that the town gets. I'm sure the region gets them. I'm not sure you get to see them, but the region does get them. So the region, I think you're nuts, about 14 million. Therefore, roughly half of that's our obligation at some point. The point is that if you take our piece of yours and ours, which is close to somewhere 18 to 20 million over the next year or two, that's been earned by the employees, teachers, or, town accountant and so forth. That's been earned through today. And so if we shut the town down, nobody had to pay any taxes, we stopped collecting taxes, we still have to pay for their health benefits going forward. Only what you're talking, what I think I heard you suggest is, well, we'll pay it in the future. Well, my kids are going to pay it in the future, not me. And that's challenging to me. So another way to look at it is, we pay our mortgage of the town with our debt service. Well, we take out debt to fix the buildings. That's a mortgage we're paying. On the pension benefits, the liability, we have an unfunded liability that it was skipping along at 4 million, all of a sudden it jumped up 2.5 million, $3.5 million bucks in a 2-year valuation period. Markets had something to do with that and all sorts of things. But nonetheless, on that, it's like a line of credit line, home equity line, that we're paying some of the principal and all of the interest. On the OPEBs, we're not even paying the interest on the darn thing, and so it's getting away from us. It just keeps growing. I don't know if that helps you, but glad to do it offline with you even further. and there are smarter people on that than me.
Are there any other? Yes, please. No, come forward. Don't do what Mike did. That's no fair to the people who are watching this tomorrow.
The microphone switched.
Yes, thank you for coming up.
I'm trying to get clarification on OPEB and pensions. OPEB is healthcare,
Yes.
pension, and I feel like people are hearing both, and there's a big difference. And the OPEB goes back to Peter and the actuarial assumptions. They're assuming some kind of percentage growth rate in the healthcare costs over the next 5 years, next 10 years, depending on the assumptions. So if you look at some OPEB assumptions, they think healthcare is going up 10% a year. Well, that goes all the way back to healthcare policy across the U.S. So when it comes to OPEB, I'm not a big believer in paying it because there's too many assumptions governing that piece, except for the people who actually need healthcare. So those who are 40 years old teaching, we have no clue whatsoever what OPEB is going to be for them in 10 years, in 20 years. So those assumptions are being built in by people who say legally you have to keep making those payments, you have to keep making those assumptions. And the actuarials are the same people who figure out your life expectancy on life insurance. and they're trying to figure out what is healthcare costs rising at. And there have been years when healthcare rises 10% a year. They tend to look at the proxy of health, like hospitals. Healthcare has been rising less than inflation the last couple of years. So if you start playing games with those numbers, you can come up with different OPEB assumptions. Same with the pension plan. If you think the stock market's going to go up 10% for the next 10 years, we're covered maybe. And there's a big difference, of course. Pension liabilities are governed slightly different. It's easier to make a projection of where investment returns are going versus healthcare. Everybody who's been involved in healthcare knows there's no defined real rate of cost for healthcare. And that's where I think, and I don't know enough about municipal law and municipal accounting, but that's where OPEB really gets off the track and causes a lot of trouble for everybody. If you look at, I'm coming from the private sector, you look at
Yes.
major corporations, most of them have, a lot of them have huge OPEBs, especially unionized companies like the auto business. They're not paying. And when they go into bankruptcy, guess what? There's no security. So unlike a pension plan, if you go into bankruptcy, the pension plan has to be made good in some way. OPEB, you go into bankruptcy, they throw it out the door. So that's, I just want to...
They are different, and they're treated differently in that the pension money goes to a state-run organization which has a private investment group which has a good track record.
Right.
It's well managed. They have readjusted their assumptions down. They have changed the amounts that the town versus the employee pays. That is something which is being professionally and reasonably handled. The OPEB, it's an obligation which is not required to be funded ahead. It is pay as you go if you want. Actuarial analyses, as you say, is a wildly variable game. The town is putting money aside because it's going to have obligations, and what you're saying is maximum putting aside might not be wise.
Right. Well,
And I don't think...
about national healthcare policy.
Yeah,
That
I don't think
shifts,
I'm going to worry that we'll ever get to the total anyway, so
Right.
maybe I'll be more comfortable that way.
The other thing is I don't believe you actually invest like a pension, in your pension liabilities. They're invested, as Grace says, in investments. You don't invest in OPEB.
Yeah.
It's sort of a...
Well, right now, what we're doing is putting $100,000 a year into our stabilization fund, knowing that it is the intent, but leaving it where it is because it is more a variable, and of course, it's not earning anything, so,
Right.
yeah. You're right. Yes, please.
Elmore Alexander. I've lived here for 3 months. I've been a property owner for 6 years. And
Okay.
I tried to keep quiet, but I can't. There are probably accountants in the room who know more about some of those things than I do. I'm a business school dean, though. I've been on regional planning groups in New York and in Philadelphia. I was shocked at what I heard here tonight because I expected this to be a presentation of dig your heels in and do nothing, and I would commend you on what you've done.
We're trying to convince people we really mean well.
This is serious stuff, and in terms of what was just being talked about, you don't know that you have cost. Excuse me, you don't go into a situation where you know you have cost and not book those and not make decisions on the basis. And that's much, much more important than whether you're going to have to pay them tomorrow or not. You're making decisions today that are going to affect what those costs are going in the future. And that's why the accountants say you have to book those, and that's what's wrong with the accounting system governmental-wise in that basis. It seems to me that you can talk, though, about managing cost and managing the cost in the city, managing cost in the school system. Unless you're going to look seriously at consolidation kinds of issues, you're not really going to solve any of those. I've seen it in New York. I've seen it in Pennsylvania, that cost. You're really rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. If you're going to make a difference, it's going to be back that critical slide that you had early on that showed the proportion of retail space, the proportion of residential space in that. You're going to have to make some changes there. I very much agree with the gentleman who's also new and accented as I am a minute ago in terms of looking at downtown, that area. You've got to look at something that maintains the nature of the community and increases the tax base. And frankly, if real estate values were going up, yeah, it would have solved your problem. But but we would have been paying it ourselves anyway. Our bills would have been going up. We would have been able to do it because the levy law wouldn't have affected us in that sense. So I really commend you. I'm shocked at what I expected, something very, very different here tonight. I'm thrilled to see that there's this kind of thing going on in Sherborn, because it's certainly the nature of the town drew us here, and I'd hate to see it dissipate over the future.
Thank you. Elliot, would you like to say something?
First thing
No?
to say is I don't have any answer for you. I wish I did. I'm fairly new in Sherborn. I moved here when I was 18 months old, and I'll be 80 in March. So I'm kind of new in town, but what to do? You want to, okay, for the past 60 years, we've been struggling, trying to keep ahead of our school buildings and the school population. I come here tonight and you're crying because the school population is going down. And I says, what? You're kidding. Here you are crying that the school population's going down. This means we're not going to have to build a new school for another 10 years perhaps. And here we've been chasing the school building, or the school buildings have been chasing us for the past 60 years. And we had to have classrooms in Pilgrim Church. There were 4 classrooms down there for the school kids. We had a couple of classrooms across in the community center while we were getting ready to build Pine Hill School. And now we're saying, gee, we got to do something. We don't have enough kids for our schools. Come on, this is great. Okay, now, back to a tax base. You want to expand the business district.
No?
And
Prove it.
if you do, you're not going to, what little bit, an acre or two that might be available downtown is not going to make one dent in the overall tax base. I've said this before, it'll never happen. If you want to expand the tax base, you put in water and sewerage on Route 115 and on Western Avenue, and zone it industry, and welcome every trucking company that wants to come in there and put up factories, high-priced buildings, and no school kids. That's how you do it.
Thank
That's
you.
how all the other towns are doing it.
Elliot,
But-
thank you.
I'm talking, don't you interrupt me. So, this is how other towns do it. Look around, look at Wellesley, look at Natick, Framingham, all your other towns, even Medfield. And that's how they do it. And here we sit, I don't have an answer. God help America and the town of Sherborn.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? You are welcome. Are you all sitting stunned? Please, come up. Don't, come to the mic.
I got several questions, and maybe
Please.
a lot of the answers, hopefully you can help me with.
Okay, well, maybe I can.
My name is Ernie Thomas. I live on Spywood Road. I've been here, 25 years. My wife passed away 20 years ago, and I have two girls who attended college and went through the Sherborn system, the school system. Now, there's been a lot of arguments here.
Into the mic. Not, yeah, just talk. No,
This is
it's fine.
dangerous. Okay, you brought up a lot of interesting subjects, and as far as tax rate projections are, and I could see it. 20 years ago, my taxes were half of what they were now,
Yes.
and it's going to get worse. You're projecting that what you're saying there, that new people coming into the school system, the school system in Pine Hill's going down to, what, 200 people, you're saying?
20%.
20%. Why? Because what did the percentage go up in the high schools?
That's right. The-
The people are moving into this town, and it's been told to me so many times, they come here to go, to send their kids to the best possible school, Dover Sherborn. So the population isn't people moving in here, buying a house, have kids, send them to Pine Hill, and go to Dover Sherborn. They're coming here to send them to Dover Sherborn. Now, one thing kind of misleading, what is Dover Sherborn High School? What do we pay per student to go to Dover Sherborn? We do not own Dover Sherborn School.
Yes.
Then why did we spend $500,000 buying property from the state for the Mass Health there? We own part of the Dover Sherborn School. When the state came back and reimbursed,
Legally, it's owned by the regional school district. Obviously, the only meaning of the district is that it's a cooperation between
I
the two
think-
towns.
Yeah, I think that since everyone is trying to leave and it's 9 o'clock, I'd like to thank you all very, very much for coming.
okay.
And I want to encourage you to stay in touch. Sign up if you'd like. Go to meetings. Pay attention. It's your town and you've got to do something. I'm sorry, but everybody's leaving. There's not much point.